Hi, everyone. If we haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name is Erika, and I am our Graham Student Ministry Pastor. I'm one of our teaching pastors here on staff. We're in a series on relationships. I'm single, so let's talk about marriage. Just kidding. No, but we are in a series on relationships. I am single. We are going to talk about singleness today. I do want to let you know that we're going to talk about maybe some things that some younger ears might not be ready for, or you might not ready to be to explain to younger ears. So if this is one that they need to sit out, we totally understand. As I said, I'm single. I'm actually currently the only single member of our teaching team, which makes me the expert on what we're talking about today. But I do want you to know that my singleness is not for a certain demographic. It's not for their lack of trying. And what demographic is that, you ask? Great question. It is creeps on the internet. Yeah, I don't know if you know this, but sometimes through Facebook, Instagram, other social media apps, people will just send you messages. And I will occasionally get some weird messages. And I thought that I would read some of them to you today. So this one from Richard Morgan was sent to me on Instagram. It says, "Hi, I'm Richard. How are you doing today? I must admit you look great and would like to know you more, be friends, and see how it goes." Richard, I'm going to have to pass on that one. This one from James Tiana, a little more aggressive. "Hey there, would you like me to be your sugar daddy? I just want good company and attention, and I'm ready to spoil you." I told someone that was sent to me, and they said, "If you say no, send them my direction." And I said, no. And this one made me laugh the hardest, and I'll explain why afterwards. I got a message from a guy named Jeffrey Walker, and he said, "How are you doing today?" Which is not that creepy. Of all the messages I just read, the least creepy. He sent that to me on Pinterest, which is an app where you can save recipes and decorating things. And I just wonder what of my pins of how to make leftovers stretch 4 days made him be like, "That's the woman I want to send a weird message to." I can't with the internet some days. And this is just an aside. If you are a dude on the internet who sends messages like this, stop. It's pretty creepy. Don't be a creepy dude on the internet. But I do think that we need to acknowledge that singleness in the church is complicated. I didn't want to just share my experience and my wisdom. I just didn't want to share my experience today. And so I did some research, and I read about churches that put people who are single kind of in a lesser status in their church. I read about one church that doesn't allow you to lead a community group unless you are married. That is not the case here at Rainier View. I even heard about one experience where the church said, "Hey, if you're single, you need to be at the church building all the time. If there is a pastor present, you're there serving. We will find you a spouse through that way." That's not great logic either. And there was this weird kind of misconception that was also put on many kids in church growing up, that if you were a good Christian teen, you would lock eyes with your one true love across the lobby of the church, and you would fall in love and live happily ever after, or you'd be standing next to each other during the worship moment, and you both would raise your hands at the same time, and you would unintentionally kind of hold hands as you did it, and you realized that was the one, and that song would then be played at your wedding, and you would never have any troubles again in your life. And I need you to know, I think that I was a pretty good Christian teen growing up, and I'm 28, and that has not been my experience or the experience of most of the other people in my life. There is a belief also both in the church and outside of the church that if you are married, you are more mature somehow. I've been saying one of my sisters is engaged, and I have occasionally offhanded just said "Oh wow, you're a real adult now." That's not the case at all. She's a real adult and I'm a real adult, even though we are both in different relationship statuses. I actually think that being a real adult is having your own Costco card, which I don't have a Costco card, so this might actually be backfiring on me. But is it more adult of me to realize that I don't need a Costco card because I'm single and therefore I don't have to buy things in bulk? I like where this logic is going for us here. Regardless of your feelings towards either being single or towards single people, there is a cultural sort of pity that is put towards single people that occasionally, single people feel like, oh, woe is me, I will die alone, no one will ever love me. But for a lot of people, we don't think about the fact that we are single every single day. We just live our life with whatever place we have found ourselves in. For some of us in the room today, we are single because of tragedy or betrayal. And I cannot speak to that particular instance with any real firsthand experience, unless we want to talk about the tragedy of my first date, but that is 100% not the same thing. I reached out, I kind of said on Instagram, hey, I'm getting ready to talk about this. What do you wish people knew? What questions do you have? And someone reached out to me and said, I'm divorced, and going to church without family for the first time in my life is actually proving to be really, really tricky. If you are here and being here was really, really difficult today, I want you to know that I see you and I see your bravery. I'm like so proud of you, and I am so glad that you are here today. Some of you who are here today, you can't remember a time in your life when you were single. You've been married for so long that you might be listening to this and thinking, this is not for me. Or you're listening and you're thinking, great, I have that sermon that I can send along to that one single person that is in my life. Don't do that today. We're going to do something a little bit different here today, because here's what we're finding. People are getting married later and later in life. People are waiting longer and longer to have kids. It is continuing to be more financially difficult to have kids. But for a lot of people, they return to church because they remember, oh, I had great experiences growing up, and I want my kids to have the same thing. So what would it look like for Rainier View to not wait until someone is married with kids to come back? But what would it look like for single people to be here and feel like they can belong and be part of what's happening? Well, that requires that we build a framework together for us to walk through with one another. And before we can build a good framework, we also have to build a really good foundation. And so we're going to build a foundation, then we're going to build a framework, and hopefully for each of us, whether you are single or married, you walk away with something today that leaves you feeling closer to God. I think the place in the Bible where we can find this most concisely explained for us is in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. And so that's where we're going to be today. So you can flip there, swipe there, tap there. I want to make sure you know about this awesome app called YouVersion that you can download, and then you will have the Bible in your phone or your tablet available to you at all times. It is a great resource. It's what I use for my reading plans. It's awesome. So I really encourage you to download that and use that. And so, like I said, we've got to build a foundation first. And so the foundation is, what's the background? What's going on? And so 1 Corinthians is a letter that was written by Paul to the church in Corinth. And Paul, as the author, he grew up first in this community that was really hostile towards Jesus and Christians. And their whole thing was, let's get them arrested, let's get them in jail, let's hopefully have them killed. They weren't just like hostile towards Christians, like writing mean things about them on the internet. There was actual genuine danger that was there. And then Paul has this incredible supernatural encounter with Jesus that changes everything. And he goes from being hostile to Jesus to worshiping Jesus. And he wants everyone to know Jesus. And so he begins to build relationships with early churches kind of all over the place. And he would travel back and forth to these churches and to all these different places. And as he would build relationships, he would address the problems that they were facing in these early churches. And no, they could not FaceTime or make phone calls or send emails or things like that. But someone would come with a message to him. Maybe it was a letter or just something that needed to be passed on to Paul about this church. And so 1 Corinthians is a letter that was written to the church in Corinth. And Paul knows specifically some of the issues that they are facing. Now Corinth was a major city in the ancient world. It existed on one of it was a port on a major trade route. And so people were constantly coming and going. There was hustle and there was bustle. And Corinth had built a bit of a reputation for itself. There were things that people knew about Corinth, that they knew that there were lots of different religions that existed within the city. They would have known that there was corrupt leadership. Corinth was known for sexual immorality. And I don't know if cities in the ancient world had slogans, but could you imagine? We're not going to speculate here, but what a slogan, what might have come for Corinth. And because Paul knows what is happening here in this particular church, he writes a letter that specifically addresses the things that they are facing. Paul knows what is critical to that church in that season. When we read the Bible today in 2022, it's not written directly to us. And so we read about the truth and the wisdom and what was super applicable to these places. And what would actually happen is this letter would show up to a church and everyone would gather to hear this letter being read aloud. Again, because it was examples and situations that were super relevant and pertinent. And so today when we write sermons, we take this truth and then we say, hey, and here's how this is pertinent to our community. Here are the examples that matter and connect. It's why we don't just sit and read this letter aloud. Also, they had longer attention spans back then, and so they could listen to this whole letter be read aloud. And so like I said, we're going to be in 1 Corinthians chapter 7 together today. And this particular portion of the letter weaves in and out of singleness and marriage. And so we are going to do some of that weaving as well, but focus more on singleness. Last week, Jeff preached on marriage. And so you can actually go and you can find that sermon online if you're wanting to know more about that. So 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 8, this is what it reads. Now to the unmarried and the widows, I say it is good for them to stay unmarried as I do. This is a great place for us to start today. Because Paul isn't just saying hey, it's okay if you're single. He is saying being single is a great thing for you to be. He is validating this place. Paul would have had significant influence in this church. He's someone that we still look up to today. And he is not just validating hey, it's okay if you're single. Paul was single himself. One of the conversations that we actually had as a teaching team was if married was the thing for every Christian to be, Jesus would have been married. But he wasn't. And none of us would say oh, well, Jesus was totally lacking. No, none of us would say that. And so for us to read this here today, single is more than an acceptable or okay thing to be. It is a great spot to be in. And if you are in the room and you are waiting to make a difference or jump into something that God might have for you, but you are waiting until you are married, do not wait. There is a beautiful life for you to live right now that is full and wonderful, that does not have to be because you are married. I would encourage you, look and see what God is calling you to now. Live a life that brings him glory now. Live a life that is full and beautiful and wonderful. Do not wait for that thing to change. And Paul doubles down on this idea in verse 17. And at first it's going to seem what you talking about, Erika? And then we will elaborate and then you will understand. So verse 17 reads this. Nevertheless, each person should live as a believer in whatever situation the Lord has assigned to them, just as God has called them. This is the rule I lay down in all the churches. Was a man already circumcised when he was called? He should not become uncircumcised. Was a man uncircumcised when he was called? He should not be circumcised. Circumcision is nothing and uncircumcision is nothing. Keeping God's commands is what counts. Each person should remain in the situation they were in when God called them. Okay, so a lot of you are like, Erika has lost her marbles. I didn't, I promise. So here's what you need to know. Paul, while he had significant influence in the early church, there were other communities where he would have had influence. And And oftentimes in the early church, and when you go through and you read the New Testament, there were two groups. There were Jewish people and there were Gentile people. And there would have been some clear markers between them. And Jewish people would have been following God previous to Jesus' arrival. And if you don't know what circumcision is, I encourage you to find an adult that you feel comfortable having awkward conversations with, and then you can talk to them about that, okay? But there was a real question, because a lot of Jewish people that had then become part of the church, they were circumcised and Gentile people weren't necessarily. And so there was a question of does every man who becomes part of this, of the church, do they all have to be, does everyone have to go through a physical change? That's the question that is being asked here. And what Paul is saying is, hey, that is inconsequential to the bigger picture. The bigger picture is, are our hearts turned towards Jesus? Are we living lives that bring him glory? We can't be focused on these small things. We have to be focused on our hearts and what we are pursuing and how we are living. So if you are single, your relationship status is not the most important thing about you. And if you are married, your relationship status is not the most important thing about you. When that becomes the marker for a person's life, we might be missing what God is doing in their life. And we cannot miss what God is doing in someone's life. Now, the natural question that comes from that verse, from these questions, is, has God assigned you to singleness? I can't answer that for you. I don't know you. I don't know your life. I don't know your experiences. I don't know all of the ramifications that would go into that. And honestly, I have to tell you that because I don't know for myself. Some days I say, yeah, you know what? I think I'm going to get married someday. That'll be really great and wonderful. This is a thing that I want. This is a thing that I think will help me follow God. And then there are some days where I am like, no, marriage, not in the cards, not gonna happen. I don't want to deal with the chaos of dating apps. I don't want to have to get to know new people or be vulnerable with new people. No, thank you, hard pass. But most days where I've landed is with the answer, maybe. But what I do know is that I'm living a full life right now, and I'm doing okay. And that's a hard fought for spot to be in, but I'm really, really glad to be in that place. And I hope that that's the place that most single people find themselves in, because God is constantly doing something incredible in all of our lives. We don't want to miss it. We want to be able to focus in and celebrate those moments. And the minute that we take our eyes off of what God is doing, we can become distracted. And oftentimes as we become distracted, we then put a priority on things that actually aren't that important. And then that becomes an even further distraction. And we don't want that for you. And that's what Paul continues to convey in his letter. We're going to jump down a little ways further to verse 25. This is what it reads. Now about virgins, I have no command from the Lord, but I give a judgment as one who by the Lord's mercy is trustworthy. Because of the present crisis, I think that it is good for a man to remain as he is. Are you pledged to a woman? Do not seek to be released. Are you free from such a commitment? Do not look for a wife. But if you do marry, you have not sinned. And if a virgin marries, she has not sinned. But those who marry will face many troubles in this life, and I want to spare you this. Paul uses the word virgins because marriage and sex are so closely tied to one another. And again, you can go back and you can listen to Jeff's sermon on this last week. You can find it online, and that will be a really great resource for you if that is a topic that you're hoping to learn more about. But Paul goes on to talk about a present crisis. And so what was this present crisis that they would have been facing? Was there a pandemic back then? No, there was not. But there was a very real pressure that every Christian felt that Jesus would return in their lifetime, that tomorrow could be the day where this happened. And what Paul is saying is, hey, how you live your life in light of that truth matters. Then that should shape how you're spending your time, what your priorities are, how you're structuring your life. And that's still a possibility for us today, but it's like been so long that we don't feel that same pressure. But that should be something that we think about in our lives. Where are we putting our time and our energy and our effort? And for Paul, the idea of going from single to married, and for myself, it's so much work. It's so much work. It takes so much time. Is that where you want to be devoting all of that time? Paul was just asking them that question. And if you're married, if you are in a safe and loving relationship, he's saying like, hey, don't throw that away. Don't give that up. That's unloving. And things that are unloving are not of Jesus. So don't just be like, peace out, I got to go do something else. No, don't do that either. What he is saying is that whatever circumstance you find yourself in, work within that place to bring God as much glory as possible. Do the things that he has called us to spread truth and love and grace everywhere that we go, no matter what your circumstance is, which he really tees up very nicely in verse 28, and then he just crushes in verse 32. This is what he goes on to say. I would like you to be free from concern. An unmarried man is concerned about the Lord's affairs. How can he please the Lord? But a married man is concerned about the affairs of this world. How can he please his wife? And his interests are divided. An unmarried woman or virgin is concerned about the Lord's affairs. Her aim is to be devoted to the Lord in both body and spirit. But a married woman is concerned about the affairs of this world, how she can please her husband. I am saying this for your own good, not to restrict you, but that you may live in a right way, in undivided devotion to the Lord. Each of us is uniquely suited in our current life stages to have an impact that only you and I can have. We each have our own friendships or families, classrooms, workplaces. We are suited to do things that only we can do. And there is a unique beauty that comes with being single in that your impact can be part of more people's lives than if you were married or if you had kids. I wholeheartedly believe that God is generous, and I don't want any of us to get stuck in a scarcity mentality. But we also have to realize that as humans, we are given a certain number of hours in the day. I once saw a fitness meme that was you have the same number of hours in a day as Beyonce. And I was like, technically you're right. And technically I don't have the same kind of crew that I can hire to run my errands for me or clean my house. So I'm still stuck with those things. Each of us have some major buckets that our time tends to fall into. And I don't know what all of them are for you, but here are some generic ones. Time with Jesus and self-care, sleeping or trying to fall asleep, serving, work, time in community, chores and errands. And then if you're married, there's the time that you devote to your spouse. And if you have kids, there's the time that you devote to raising your kids. I don't have those last two that I have to navigate in my life, which means that all those other things on that list, I get to live differently. It means that when I am cleaning my house, I can put headphones on and listen to a podcast or a sermon because I'm not having to listen to, does someone else need me? Is there a kid crying? Does someone need food? When I run errands, I can be open to flexibility, or I can invite a friend along, or there can be a change in my schedule because I'm not worried about, okay, I have to be here and I have to be here and I have to be here so I can get home in plenty of time to get ready to then go and do something with my husband. No, I get to have a flexibility that I would not have if I were married. And when I am with my community, which I count my sisters and my parents as part of my community, I get to be super present and all in and all focused because I'm not worried about who at home might need me. I get to be all there. The best marriages that I have seen have been ones where both people are trying to outserve the other one. That is amazing. I hope for that someday, but I'm not in that place right now, so I don't have to have that same focus. I don't have to put all of my energy towards that place, which means I get to be part of a bunch of different people's lives. If you are single, do not waste away this season waiting for someone to show up. Build a life that only you can live. I have been really fortunate to have some of the best friendships possible that I've worked really hard to build. And a lot of those friends are married, and a lot of those married friends have kids. And so what does that mean for me? Well, it means I've been bridesmaid Erika, and now I'm Auntie Erika. And it means I plan bridal showers and bachelorette parties. It also means I throw baby showers. And I know a lot about like the world of diapering, which apparently is like very convoluted. I am shocked at the depth that exists in the world of parenting, but I don't actually have to make those decisions. I have learned how to show up to support my friends well in their seasons, and they do the same for me. It means that one night I was sitting with two of my best friends. We were at one of their houses, and they lived about 45 minutes away from me. And I said, okay, I want to leave here about 9 o'clock tonight. It was like a Saturday night, and I knew that I had to be up, and I had to be ready to do church stuff Sunday morning. And so I said, okay, I'll try and be out of here around 9. But at about 8:45, they start sharing, here's been my experience, here's what's been wonderful, here's what's been difficult. And I was given this gift, this privilege to hear about those beautiful, difficult, complicated moments. In this season, it means that I get to go to meals at other people's houses. My favorite days are when I do breakfast, lunch, and dinner all at different people's houses, because no one has to pack up kids and get them to my house. It's far more convenient for me. It's great. It's wonderful. I am building a life that I can only live right now. And I will also say this. Those friends of mine, they do a really beautiful job of showing up for me as well. When I said, again on Instagram, like, hey, I'm getting ready to talk about this, someone asked, how do I care about my single friends well and never give off the vibe that I just want them to get married? Which is a great question. And it's the same advice that we would give to anybody. Care about that person as a whole person. Those friends do care about my dating life, but they also care about what's happening with my family, and they care about what Jesus is teaching me, and they care about my mental health. Like, I'm a whole person to them, not the single person that they're trying to get married off. And no matter what your relationship status is, we cannot define someone just by that one marker, whatever it may be. Single, married, parents, working, not working. There's so much more to us than just one identifier. And so learn about those things. Each of us in this room are more than our relationship status. God loves you independently of the love that you are receiving here on earth. And based on the stories that I have heard, people feel about being single the same way they oftentimes feel about being married. It is wonderful, and it is complicated, and it is difficult. Some days are really, really hard, but living a full life is worth it. And so here's what I want to encourage you with if you're single. When you are looking for who you're going to date, look for someone who is going to enhance what is already happening in your life, someone who is going to run in the same direction with you towards what God has called you to. Do not look for a person who will solve the problem of loneliness. Look for the person who is going to help you get closer to God, not further away. Hold what God says about you higher than what the person you're into says about you. So with that encouragement in mind, here's my challenge for all of us. Because I think all of us have questions and maybe some complicated feelings around being single. And so your challenge this week, and it's not one that you can necessarily just set aside time to pray about. It's one that you're going to have to pay attention to in real time. But it's, where do you have some negativity towards singleness? When you see someone at a restaurant eating a meal by themselves, do you feel sorry for them? Knock it off. Unless they are actively crying into their meal, let them be. Assume that they're having the time of their life. If you are single and you're wanting to go somewhere and you think, oh no, I can't go to that place because I am not married, show up there. You're just as worthy of being there as someone who is there with someone else. If you are listening to someone complain about something that's happening in your life and you think, shut up, I wish I could complain about that, sort out what that is. And that can go both ways. You might be single and hearing someone complain about their marriage and be like, gosh, I wish I could complain about that. And you might be married and hear someone complaining about like, sometimes I just feel really lonely because no one is around. And you might be thinking, I have not been alone in 10 years. Someone has always been in my space for 10 years. Shut up. I wish I could complain about that. And while there is so many aspects to wanting to figure out where are you holding maybe some negative thoughts, here's what it really is. When we hold negative thoughts, it builds up resentment towards other people and towards other life stages, and it can become a real distraction from what God has called all of us to, which is to view each person as loved, which is to care for other people, for us to be whole people that are living, chasing down God and bringing the fullness of the kingdom of God here on earth. And each of you is capable of doing that in your life stage that no one else is capable of doing. Each of us is more than a relationship status. And when we realize that, we are realizing that God is working in our midst every single day.
Thanks for joining us here at RVCC Online here today. Again, my name is Crystal, and I would just love for you to personally reach out. You can do so at crystalc@rainierview.org and just be a part of our church family. We love doing life with you here at Rainier View. And as just a quick reminder, again, you can head out to rainierview.org/online, and there you can find all of our amazing and incredible tools. You can get our past messages, you can follow us on socials, and you can listen to our podcast there as well. That is a great tool to have throughout the week. So don't just click off here, head out to our website. Thanks again for being here, and we'll see you next week.